Hello everybody, my name is Meghan MacLennan, and my presentation today will be on South Bar, Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. South Bar is less of a town and more of a smattering of houses on either side of a long highway that stretches between Whitney Pier and New Waterford. Many years ago, South Bar was filled with farmland, and many of the abandoned fields have since been taken over by nature. My house and the land surrounding it were once part of my family's dairy farm, but that has long since shut down. The Sydney Harbour sits to the left of the community, but a large stretching expanse of Acadian forest can be found to the right. The audio you are now hearing by Cosmo Sheldrake, titled Dawn Chorus, reminded me of the small community on the Sydney Harbour where I grew up. Every morning I would wake up to a chorus of bird songs, primarily mourning doves, American crows, and seagulls. Occasionally, pheasants, chickens, blue jays, and smaller assorted bird species would chime in. Most of these birds took shelter in the many trees surrounding my house. It is because of this that I was reminded of my home and the Acadian forest that surround it. Cape Breton, namely the Sydney area which South Bar is a part of, experiences the warm summer subtype of the humid continental climate. This climate is given a Köppen code of DBF, D meaning that it experiences a continental cold, F meaning that there is no dry season, and B meaning that it experiences a warm summer. More often than not, it is cold and temperate, with an average temperature of 6.8 degrees Celsius. On average, the Sydney area receives 1,365 millimeters of rainfall per year. Acadian forests, such as those found in South Bar, are composed of both hard and softwood trees. While there are many kinds of these trees, the Acadian forests of Cape Breton are predominantly comprised of the sugar maple, the yellow birch, the American beech, balsam fir, and eastern hemlock. Some of these trees can become very large and very old, with trunks growing to be a meter in diameter and trees living up to 300 years of age. Seedlings and saplings tend to cover most of the canopy-shaded ground, the rest being covered by shade-tolerant plants, such as ferns, striped maple, snowberry, trailing arbutus, rose-twisted stalk, Dutchman's breeches, and toothwort. It is very easy to find animals in South Bar. My family and I joke that we practically have a zoo in our own backyard. However, it is clear that most of these animals are common within the Acadian forests that surround our home. These animals include the white-tailed deer, the red fox, the bobcat, the deer mouse, the masked shrew, the red-eyed vireo, the blue jay, the American redstart, and the American robin. Eastern coyotes have also been spotted in forests around South Bar on more than one occasion, including by my father on his hunting cameras. In my research for this presentation, I found that no one has made a food web for the South Bar region specifically. Now, I am not well versed in many of these species' diets, so instead of a large, interconnected food web, I made a small trophic cascade diagram to reflect some of the interactions going on within the South Bar Acadian forests. A trophic level can be described as an organism's position within a food chain. One's level is dependent upon the amount of energy transferred from primary producers, such as plants, to that organism. On the left, we can see that the eastern coyote is at the top of the food chain. In this case, the eastern coyote would be our secondary consumer. These animals are carnivores and typically prey on the white-tailed deer, our primary consumer. These deer are herbivores and eat many types of plants, but I specifically wanted to highlight one of the species commonly found within South Bar, the creeping snowberry, our diagram's primary producer. As shown on the left, the coyotes prey on the white-tailed deer, decreasing the deer population. The white-tailed deer eat the creeping snowberries, decreasing the berry population. However, the coyotes, being the deer's predators, increase the snowberry population as there are less deer to eat the berries thanks to the predators. On the right, I show a potential top-down trophic cascade. Trophic cascades occur when there is a loss of a level that has major impacts for the populations of the species above or below it. As this population is controlled by coyote predation, this will be a top-down trophic cascade. We can see that humans who hunt coyotes have been introduced to the region. I picked this as an example, as hunting is a common staple in the South Bar area due to our large expanse of animal-filled forest right behind our own homes. As stated, the humans will hunt the coyotes, decreasing the coyote population. Due to the lack of predation on the deer by the coyotes, the deer population increases. This causes creeping snowberry population to decrease, as there are now more deer which feed on the berries in order to survive. Therefore, human hunters in this trophic cascade diagram have a positive effect on the deer population, but negative effects on both the populations of eastern coyotes and creeping snowberries. This trophic cascade model has shown one of the many interspecific biotic interactions that can be found within the forests of South Bar. One of the many abiotic factors that could be found within South Bar would be the interaction of the old farm field soil and the plants that grow there. There are several old farm fields among the forests of South Bar, including the 3-acre block and the ammunition field. These fields were used to grow hay for the cows to both graze on outside and eat back in their pens. They were well maintained by the farmers who'd used them, and the soil was fertilized with nutrients from cow manure, creating an excellent environment for the plants to grow in. After the farms closed and hay was no longer grown there, the soil was still considered good quality. In fact, it was considered to be good enough quality topsoil that the dirt was used during the creation of Cape Breton's Open Hearth Park. Open Hearth Park was built on top of the tar ponds, but is now full of lush grass thanks to the nutrient-filled topsoil from these two South Bar fields. Unfortunately, while the park thrived, these two fields lost good, nutritious topsoil. It has been 10 years since the park opened, and longer still since the park was in construction. Even though the field area was reseeded, only now have small spruce trees begun to sprout, likely due to the lack of nutrients within the remaining soil. This is not the only decimation of plant life in South Bar. The video you have been viewing in the background was recorded 4 years ago in 2019. South Bar looks much different now after Hurricane Fiona, which made landfall in Nova Scotia on the 24th of September 2022. Fiona decimated the plant life both around the South Bar Highway and within the forest surrounding the community. Many old, large trees were knocked down by the wind. In some cases, the military needed to be called in to remove the trees which had fallen down across the highway, the driveways, and into houses. Despite the tragic loss of such a large amount of trees, the Acadian forests of South Bar would give us great insight into the mechanisms of succession, similarly to that of Point Pleasant Park in Halifax. Succession is the gradual community change in an area after a great disturbance, much like Hurricane Fiona. Secondary succession, which is what South Bar will now experience, takes place when the disturbance removes members of the previous ecological community, in this case the old, long-standing trees, but doesn't change the soil and substrate. It is likely that I will get to view the early stages of secondary succession when I return to South Bar this coming summer. With the absence of these large old trees that shade younger plants, I will hopefully get to see lots of new, more diverse sprouts growing in the soil. The Mi'kmaq understanding of Natukumlink comes to mind when I think about my home in South Bar. This concept makes you think about how we humans are so innately connected with the natural world that it should be at the forefront of our subconsciousness, and because of that, we must be aware of not creating imbalances between us and nature. When I walk around the forests of South Bar, I am constantly in awe of the beautiful sights and sounds that are available to me. It makes me aware of how I treat the natural world around me. It makes me want to do more to protect it. Using two-eyed seeing, the indigenous practice of combining Western and indigenous knowledge together, I could combine Natukumlink with nature conservation strategies I have learned while at university to take better care of the nature in my hometown. South Bar is very dear to my heart, as I have lived there for the majority of my life. I hope that you have enjoyed learning about the place I call home and the plant life and wildlife that live within it. Thank you for listening.